They say home is where the heart is, without ever asking. This is especially true with my brother Jason, who never quite figured out what responsibility means. I was shocked when my parents suddenly sold our childhood home. They just showed up on my doorstep, suitcases in hand, acting like they owned the place. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. My parents, Martha and Frank, worked steady jobs that kept us firmly in the middle class. We never had extravagant vacations or luxury cars, but we never went without necessities either. From my earliest memories, the dynamic between my brother Jason and me was crystal clear. Though only 3 years older, Jason received an entirely different set of rules and expectations. When he forgot homework, Mom would rush to school with it. When he quit the baseball team mid-season because practices were too early, Dad just nodded and said, "Maybe next year's sport." But when I asked to drop piano lessons that conflicted with the science club, I got a 30-minute lecture about commitment and following through. This pattern continued through high school. Jason barely graduated while I maintained a 4.0 GPA, despite working weekends at the local pharmacy. Nursing is so demanding. My parents attended my graduation, of course. After graduation, I moved into a tiny studio apartment and started my career at Memorial Hospital. Sometimes as little as $100, other times as much as $500 when I worked holidays or picked up overtime. "At least he has reliable transportation for interviews," Mom would say, conveniently forgetting they had co-signed for that car. It took me 7 years of disciplined saving and frugal living to accumulate enough for a down payment. By then, I had moved to a slightly larger one-bedroom apartment but still lived with second-hand furniture and cooked most meals at home. Every extra dollar went toward my house fund. It wasn't the biggest or the newest house, but it had character. A small yard and 3 bedrooms. When her realtor told her a young nurse was interested in the house, she immediately invited me over for tea. She showed me photos of her nursing career, from her days in a crisp white uniform and cap to more recent pictures before her retirement. She told me she felt better knowing her home would go to someone who understood the value of care. When another buyer offered $5,000 more, she still chose my offer. Every double shift, every meal of ramen noodles, every birthday where I asked for Home Depot gift cards instead of clothes or jewelry had led to this moment. I spent the first month painting and fixing up small things, making the space truly mine. Because despite everything, family remained important to me. I invited my parents and Jason for the first official dinner in my new home, cooking my mother's famous lasagna recipe as a gesture of gratitude for their support, however uneven it had been. It was during these dinners that I began noticing changes in their behavior. "They're just getting older," I told myself. "Everyone worries about retirement." Little did I know that these subtle shifts in behavior were the first warning signs of what was coming. When the doorbell rang, I expected the usual greetings and casual updates about their week. Jason had texted that he would be 30 minutes late, something about traffic, though the roads had been clear on my grocery run earlier. When Jason finally arrived, he seemed different too, almost smug. "There's some big news," Dad announced after we had all served ourselves. The fork froze halfway to my mouth. "But why?" I managed to ask, setting my fork down as my appetite instantly vanished. "The neighborhood is changing, and that 2-story layout isn't getting any easier on our knees." Dad nodded vigorously. "When are you thinking of moving?" I asked. I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. "But where will you go? Have you found a new place?" "We're figuring that out," Dad said dismissively. Something didn't add up. My parents had always been planners, sometimes to a fault. "I can help you look for apartments," I offered. "Well, think about it," Dad said, in that tone that meant they definitely would not think about it. "Mom and Dad know what they're doing. They don't need you micromanaging their decisions." The rest of dinner passed in awkward conversation, with my parents deflecting any specific questions about their plans. I'm still trying to process it. There was a pause on the line. "Well, at least Jason is getting set up nicely. Martha must be relieved." My hand tightened around the phone. "I assumed you knew. Martha mentioned they were helping Jason financially. Something about him finally being responsible enough to manage his own place." After hanging up, I sat motionless on my couch, pieces falling into place. I knew it was a long shot and possibly crossing an ethical line, but I had to know. Tara, I know you can't give me specifics about my parents' accounts, but hypothetically, if someone sold a house they own free and clear in Oakwood Heights, what kind of money would they be looking at? Tara didn't hesitate. My parents' home wasn't extravagant, but they had paid it off years ago, and property values in their neighborhood had risen steadily. I needed to confront him directly. When he opened the door, he was packing boxes. Moving to Lakeside after all? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. His smile faltered slightly. Yeah, signed the lease yesterday. 35th floor. Sweet view of the river. That's what? $3,000 a month. He shrugged. The job's going well. Jason workadays a sales rep for Alico Brewery. A job he enjoyed but thata nu didn't painter line now for luxury living. Cut the crap, Jason. I said. Ik know about the mini. His face changed, defiance replacing the falskazolness. So had if momandadera helping mout. Thwantesima suxt. $3,000 a month. Jason worked as a sales rep for a local brewery. A job he enjoyed but that I knew didn't pay nearly enough for luxury living. Cut the crap, Jason, I said. His face changed, defiance replacing the false casualness. $3,000 a month? He shrugged. The job's going well. Jason workadays a sales rep for Alico Brewery. A job he enjoyed but thata nu didn't painter line now for luxury living. Cut the crap, Jason. I said. Ik know about the mini. His face changed, defiance replacing the falskazolness. So had if momandadera helping mout. The wantesima suxt. Jason had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, confirming my suspicion. But you took it, I pointed out. All of it, apparently. I shook my head in disbelief. He suddenly became very interested in taping a box. Just until they figure things out. They admitted everything, though they tried to frame it as a positive. We're considering our options, Mom said. Like moving in with me? I asked pointedly. Maybe just for a little while, Dad finally admitted. I left their house that day with a mounting sense of dread. The worst part was that they hadn't even asked me. They had just assumed I would accommodate them indefinitely. Instead, they had created this crisis and expected me to solve it for them, all while Jason enjoyed his windfall in a luxury high-rise. Exactly 1 week after learning the truth, my doorbell rang at 7:30 on a Saturday morning. Standing on my porch were my parents, surrounded by suitcases, with my father's pickup truck parked at the curb, its bed piled high with boxes and furniture. Surprise, Mom said with a brightness that seemed forced even through my sleep haze. We closed early. I stood frozen in the doorway, my brain struggling to process what was happening. Dad stepped forward with a box in his arms. Going to let us in, kiddo? The moving guys will be here with the rest of our stuff in a couple of hours. The rest? I repeated dumbly. What do you mean, the rest? The storage unit couldn't fit everything. My mind was racing. They hadn't asked if they could move in. They had just shown up, assuming I would accommodate them. I thought you were still looking at apartments. Oh, we are, Mom assured me, though her tone lacked conviction. It's just what worked for me. By evening, I was overwhelmed. Family photos I had never agreed to display now adorned my walls. Throw pillows in colors that clashed with my decor covered my couch, and the subtle lavender scent of my preferred candles had been replaced by my mother's stronger perfume. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my parents moving around my house, I told myself it would be okay. This was just for a weekend, maybe a week at most. They would find their own place soon. But days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, my parents entrenched themselves further. Dad established a morning routine that involved watching the news at full volume beginning at 5:30, despite knowing I often worked late shifts. Mom took over the kitchen, entirely dismissing my meal prep system and healthy eating habits. You work too hard to eat like a rabbit, she would say, replacing my prepared salads with heavy casseroles and desserts. Attempts to discuss their apartment search were met with vague responses. Mom rearranged furniture while I was at work, claiming the new layout made more sense. Dad invited his friends over to watch sports without asking, leaving beer bottles and snack residue throughout my living room. You're always working. We raised you in our house for 18 years, Dad added. You can't spare a few rooms for a couple of months? My supervisor noticed the change. Everything okay at home, Amanda? She asked during a break. You seem distracted lately. I couldn't bring myself to explain the full situation, so I just blamed it on some family stuff. Take care of yourself, she advised. But how could I be at my best when my personal space had been invaded, my routines disrupted, and my very sense of ownership in my own home undermined? The breaking point of this phase came when I returned from an overnight shift to find my parents hosting a family brunch. Not just from exhaustion or frustration, but from the deep sense of betrayal that my parents had used me as a solution to a problem they had created themselves, all while Jason enjoyed the fruits of their generosity in his Riverview luxury apartment. The family brunch incident was just the beginning of increasingly brazen boundary violations. A week later, I returned home from a particularly grueling shift where I had lost a patient, a rarity in my career that always hit me hard. My parents had invited their church group over for a potluck dinner. Amanda, Mom called when she spotted me. Come meet Pastor Williams and his wife. I murmured a quick greeting before escaping upstairs, only to discover someone had been in my bedroom, the one space I had explicitly declared off-limits. When I confronted Mom later, her response was infuriating. The conversation devolved from there, with Mom turning the situation around to make it seem like I was being unreasonable for wanting basic privacy in my own home. The small daybed I kept for overnight guests was now made up as a permanent bed. My desk was pushed into a corner, and my reference books were packed away in boxes. What happened in here? I asked Dad, who was watching television downstairs. Your mother thought Jason might want to stay over sometimes, he explained casually. Since he's been so busy with the new place, we hardly see him. I stood speechless. They had given Jason nearly $300,000, which had funded his move to a luxury apartment, and now they were rearranging my home to accommodate his occasional visits. That was my office, I finally managed to say. I need that space for work. You can work at the kitchen table, Dad replied. It's not like you use the office every day. That night Jason called, a rare occurrence. Thought I'd come by this weekend, check out the family setup. I'm working doubles. Mom said you'd made up a room for me, he pressed. There was an awkward pause. Look, I know things are weird right now, but can't you just roll with it for a while? They're getting older. They need someone to take care of them. The hypocrisy was stunning. They need someone to take care of them? Then why did they give you all their money? And they wanted me to have it. It's not my fault they decided to stay with you instead of getting their own place. They gave you enough money to buy your own house outright, and instead you're living in a luxury apartment while they invade my space, and somehow I'm the bad guy for being upset about it? Jason became defensive. After hanging up, I realized my brother still didn't get it or chose not to. In his mind, he deserved the money, and my parents deserved my space, and I was being difficult for questioning any of it. The final straw came 3 days later when I arrived home to find a locksmith changing my front door lock. Order placed by Frank Miller. Is that your husband? Ma'am, I just do what the work order says. I called my father immediately. Dad, why is there a locksmith changing my locks? Oh, your mother kept misplacing her key, he explained. Thought it would be easier just to get new ones. Don't worry, he'll give you copies. The casual way he said it, as if it was the most normal thing in the world to change the locks on someone else's home without permission, made something snap inside me. Tell him to stop right now, I said, my voice shaking. Those are my locks. This is my house. You had no right. It's just locks. I hung up and went directly to the locksmith. I am the homeowner, I said firmly. I need to see identification proving who ordered this work. When my parents returned from grocery shopping an hour later, I was waiting in the living room, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. Mom glanced at Dad, concern crossing her face. Is everything okay? Everything is very much not okay. That's not the point, I insisted. You can't make changes to my home without asking me. This isn't your house. Well, Mom said with a little laugh. It kind of is now, isn't it? We're family. My parents genuinely believed they were entitled to my home simply because we were related. They had given Jason money and expected me to give them shelter in return, without ever actually having a conversation about it. That evening, after their grocery shopping was put away, I asked my parents to sit down for a serious conversation. I had prepared notes, practiced what I would say, and was determined to remain calm and rational. I want to talk about living arrangements, I began carefully. Mom immediately looked uncomfortable. I thought things were going well. There have been serious boundary issues that we need to address. I took a deep breath. Yes, we're family, but this is still my home. I've worked hard for it, and I need to have some control over my own space. Their reaction was worse than I had anticipated. We raised you, put food on the table. But that doesn't mean you own me or my home. Because I wanted basic respect in my own home. We thought you'd be happy to help us out, Dad continued. Jason got the financial help, and you're getting the joy of taking care of your parents. I stared at him, truly speechless for a moment. Is that really how you see this? As an even exchange? Most of our money went to helping your brother. You want your elderly parents out on the street? They exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Even after giving Jason $280,000, you should have some left for yourselves. Another uncomfortable exchange of glances. We gave Jason a bit more than that, Mom admitted. He needed money for furniture, and the security deposit was 6 months rent up front for that fancy building. How much do you have left? They wouldn't give me an exact figure, but from their evasive answers, I gathered it was far less than I had assumed. Probably not enough for first and last month's rent plus a security deposit on even a modest apartment. The conversation continued to deteriorate from there. Every attempt I made to establish boundaries or propose solutions was met with emotional manipulation. Mom cried harder. Dad brought up childhood sacrifices they'd made. Both implied I was being selfish and ungrateful. When I suggested they ask Jason to contribute some of the money back to help them get established in their own place, they reacted as if I'd suggested something scandalous. More devastated than I am having my home taken over? I asked. Jason's irresponsibility had once again been rewarded, while my hard work and sacrifice had made me the family caretaker by default. Mom says you're being difficult about them staying with you. Not cool, sis. They gave us everything growing up. Least you can do is help them out now. The weight of the situation crushed down on me. It wasn't just about the space, though that was significant. I could not continue living like this, walking on eggshells in my own home, watching my carefully built life crumble under the weight of obligations I had never agreed to shoulder. That night I made a decision. If reason and emotional appeals wouldn't work, I would need to take more drastic measures to reclaim my home and my life. I needed time to think, to strategize, to regain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond anything I could have imagined. My first call was to Sarah, a friend from nursing school who had gone on to law school and now specialized in property law. I explained the situation in detail, holding nothing back. So legally, where do I stand? I asked after laying out the whole mess. Since your parents don't have a lease and haven't established tenancy yet in most states, that takes 30 days, you could technically ask them to leave immediately. Then it becomes more complicated, she admitted. You might have to go through formal eviction proceedings, which can be lengthy and frankly devastating to family relationships. Despite everything, I still loved them. But I also recognized that their behavior had crossed from presumptuous into manipulative and potentially financially abusive. Put everything in writing, she advised. My next call was to my cousin Lisa, my mother's niece, who had always been the voice of reason in family disputes. I knew she would be honest with me about how my actions would be perceived by the extended family. Honestly, Amanda, most of the family has no idea what's really going on, Lisa told me. The revision of reality took my breath away. I quickly filled Lisa in on the truth, including the money given to Jason and my parents' subsequent financial vulnerability. That's not what we've been told, Lisa said slowly. Your mom told Aunt Kathy that they gave Jason a small loan for his apartment deposit and were helping you with your mortgage. Another lie. I had never received a penny from my parents for my house. Meanwhile, I consulted with a financial advisor, paying for an emergency session to understand what options might be available for my parents. Based on their approximate age and work history, he outlined several possibilities for them, from senior apartments with income-based rent to accelerating their Social Security benefits. All of these options would require significant downsizing from their previous lifestyle, but none would leave them homeless or destitute as they had implied. Armed with this information, I moved to the next phase of my plan. The most difficult part was preparing myself emotionally. I scheduled an emergency session with my therapist, Dr. Myers, whom I had been seeing occasionally since starting my nursing career to deal with the emotional toll of the job. "What you're describing is a classic case of family role entrenchment," she explained. "You've been cast as the responsible caretaker, while your brother gets to be the one who needs help." With her guidance, I practiced setting and maintaining boundaries, worked on managing the guilt I knew would come, and prepared myself for the confrontation that was inevitable. My final preparation was creating a formal written notice for my parents, outlining my expectations and a timeline for them to find alternative housing. I set a deadline of 30 days, provided resources for senior housing options in the area, and even offered to help them with the first 3 months' rent to ease the transition. I invited Jason as well, since his role in this situation could not be ignored, and arranged for a professional mediator to attend to help keep the conversation productive. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios: my parents disowning me, extended family taking their side, becoming the villain in a story where I had only tried to protect myself. But beneath the anxiety was a growing sense of resolve. This was my home, and while I was willing to help my family in reasonable ways, I would no longer allow them to take advantage of my generosity or disrespect my boundaries. And for the first time in weeks, I felt truly awake, truly present in my own life, in my own home. Sunday arrived with a tense stillness in the house. This setup makes it clear we're all equal participants in this conversation. My parents entered first, looking confused by the unfamiliar face and formal arrangement. Mom looked stricken. "I need someone neutral to help us communicate effectively," I said, sticking to the script Diane and I had prepared. "Amanda has asked for this meeting because she has concerns about the current living arrangements in her home," Diane began. "I'd like her to share those concerns first." I took a deep breath and pushed forward. "6 weeks ago, you arrived at my doorstep with no warning and moved into my home." I began looking at my parents. "Since then, you've rearranged my furniture, converted my office to a bedroom, hosted parties without asking, invaded my private space, and even tried to change my locks." I continued. "My understanding is that you sold your house and gave most of the proceeds to Jason, leaving yourselves without enough money for your own place. While I sympathize with your situation, I was never consulted about this plan, and it's unfair to expect me to house you indefinitely without any discussion or agreement. Would one of you like to respond to what Amanda has shared?" Dad went first, his voice defensive. "And we're not just freeloading," Mom added quickly. "I appreciate everything you've done for me growing up," I said carefully. "But that doesn't mean I owe you my home or my autonomy as an adult. Parents choose to have children. Children don't choose to be born. Look, I didn't ask them to give me the money. They offered. And you accepted it," I pointed out, "knowing they would need somewhere to live afterward? It sounds like there was a significant miscommunication about plans following the sale of the house. Frank, Martha, what was your understanding of the living arrangements that would follow?" What emerged over the next hour was revealing. My parents admitted they had never actually intended to find their own place. The plan, which they had never explicitly shared with either Jason or me, was to live with me permanently. As for the money, they had indeed given Jason far more than I had initially thought. Beyond the house proceeds, they had liquidated most of their retirement accounts as well, incurring significant penalties for early withdrawal. "In what?" I asked Jason directly. He looked away. Further questioning revealed that Jason had quit his brewery job shortly after receiving the money and was now pursuing various entrepreneurial schemes, none of which had any track record of success. "What is this?" Dad demanded, scanning the papers. "An eviction notice?" "It's a timeline," I clarified. "I'm willing to help you transition to your own place, including assisting with the first 3 months' rent, but I need my home back." Mom began crying in earnest. Dad accused me of being heartless. Jason simply sat back, watching the drama unfold as if it had nothing to do with him. Through it all, Diane maintained control, reminding everyone of the ground rules and redirecting the conversation when it veered into unproductive territory. After the initial shock wore off, We managed to have a more constructive discussion about next steps. Maybe, he said slowly, I could contribute something toward their housing costs since they did help me out. It was the first acknowledgement from him that he bore any responsibility for the situation. Not a full solution, but a start. My parents would move out within 30 days. Jason would contribute $1,000 monthly toward their housing for the first year. Jason, perhaps feeling the weight of family scrutiny, actually followed through on his financial commitment, setting up an automatic transfer to their account. Some days they were icy and formal, barely speaking to me. I was not responsible for housing my parents after they had given away their resources, nor was I obligated to sacrifice my well-being to make them comfortable. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, safe, and within their means with Jason's contribution. As the last box was loaded into the moving truck, Mom hugged me stiffly. I know you think we're being dramatic, she said, but this feels like abandonment to us. It started with my mom's coffee invitation, which turned into a weekly ritual. We didn't talk about the past right away, but we started building a new future. One day about a year later, my dad called. The faucet in our kitchen is leaking, he said. I know it's a long shot, but do you think you could help me take a look? When I got there, he had all the tools laid out. We spent an hour under the sink, getting soaked and laughing. Felt like old times, but better. Jason even started to change. He got a steady job and started paying my parents back a little each month. My parents brought dessert without me asking. My home was finally my sanctuary again, but it was also a place where my family could be welcome, on terms we had all built together. It means building something strong enough to hold everyone, boundaries and all. If my story resonated with you, I would love to hear your own experiences in the comments below. How did you handle it? Hit that like button if you think I made the right decision, and please subscribe to hear more stories about navigating the complicated, beautiful journey of family.